What if I told you that the most powerful empires in history didn't just change borders, they shaped the world we live in today? From the pyramids of Egypt to the towering walls of Constantinople, these empires built civilizations that thrived on military might, trade, culture, and innovation. But what made them rise to such incredible power, and what caused them to fall? Stick with me as we take a journey through the ancient, classical, medieval, early modern, and colonial empires that left a lasting mark on history, and discover the key moments that made and broke these global giants. So, what made these empires rise to such towering heights, and more importantly, what brought them down? Each empire tells us something unique about the dynamics of power, wealth, military strength, and leadership. In this video, we'll uncover the secrets behind their success and the reasons for their ultimate decline. Let's begin with the ancient empires, where human civilization first learned to organize power on a grand scale. The dawn of human civilization saw the rise of the first great empires in history. These early powers laid the foundations of governance, architecture, and culture. Through a combination of military conquest, trade, and innovation, these empires became the dominant forces of their time, spreading their influence far beyond their borders. But as much as they rose through their strengths, their downfall often came from within, through internal strife, overexpansion, or the weight of their own power. The rise of ancient Egypt can be traced back to its unique geographical advantage, the Nile River. This river, with its predictable flooding and fertile soil, provided consistent agricultural wealth and created the stability needed for Egypt to flourish. Unlike other civilizations that struggled with the unpredictability of nature, Egypt had the Nile to rely on year after year. This wealth allowed the development of a centralized government under the pharaoh, who wasn't just a political leader, he was considered divine, a living god. Egypt's early structure of governance allowed for the construction of monumental projects, from the pyramids of Giza to the temples of Karnak, which symbolized their incredible wealth and power. Egypt also excelled in military tactics, mastering the use of chariots and early bronze weapons to defend its borders and expand into regions like Nubia and the Levant. This military prowess, combined with a highly centralized bureaucracy, allowed the New Kingdom, 1550 to 1070 BC, to emerge as one of the most dominant powers in the ancient world, trading with distant regions like Greece and Mesopotamia. Egyptian culture had a profound influence on the ancient world. The development of hieroglyphic writing, their mastery of architecture, and their obsession with the afterlife gave rise to iconic symbols like the pyramids and the Sphinx. Egypt's religion, which focused on the worship of gods like Ra, Osiris, and Isis, played a central role in everyday life, influencing art, architecture, and even politics. The grand scale of Egypt's tombs and temples reflects the importance they placed on the afterlife, with the belief that pharaohs would continue to rule in the next world. For all its early advantages, Egypt suffered from a critical weakness. It was too dependent on the stability of its centralized government and the charisma of its pharaohs. After the death of powerful rulers like Ramses II, Egypt's unity faltered. Dynastic struggles for power began to destabilize the empire, and new invaders took advantage of the weakened state. The Assyrians, Persians, and eventually Alexander the Great swept in, each conquering Egypt in turn. The final blow came when Rome annexed Egypt in 30 BC, turning the once great empire into a Roman province. Egypt's reliance on divine kingship, combined with internal strife and external invasions, brought an end to its independence. Known as the war machine of the ancient world, Assyria became an empire through the sheer force of its military. The Assyrians were the first to develop a professional standing army, one that trained and fought year-round. They pioneered military tactics like siege warfare, using battering rams and siege towers to break into fortified cities that others couldn't touch. Their use of iron weapons, stronger and more durable than bronze, gave them a deadly advantage in battle. Assyria's success in warfare was so complete that their conquests stretched from Babylon to Egypt and from Turkey to Persia. The capital city of Nineveh was a marvel of the ancient world, home to the famous library of Ashurbanipal, which contained thousands of clay tablets with knowledge from across the empire. The Assyrians also excelled at governance. They perfected the art of fear, using brutal tactics to keep rebellious regions in line. Mass deportations, where entire populations were forcibly relocated, were used to prevent uprisings. While Assyria was known primarily for its military prowess, it also contributed to culture through its grand architectural projects and its promotion of knowledge. The Library of Ashurbanipal, for example, housed a vast collection of Sumerian and Babylonian texts, preserving much of the ancient knowledge of Mesopotamia. Assyrian art, particularly their relief sculptures, often depicted scenes of battle, conquest, and the royal hunt, reflecting the militaristic culture of the empire. However, as effective as fear was in the short term, it created deep resentment. The constant revolts in Assyrian provinces required more resources and more soldiers to suppress, overextending the empire. By the late 7th century BC, the Assyrian Empire had made too many enemies, and in 612 BC, a coalition of Babylonians, Medes, and others destroyed Nineveh and ended the empire. Assyria's downfall shows the limits of ruling through fear. Eventually, the costs outweigh the benefits, and an empire built on terror can't sustain itself. Babylon's early success can be credited to its position as a center of trade and culture in Mesopotamia. Under Hammurabi, the Babylonians created one of the earliest codified systems of laws, the famous Code of Hammurabi, which laid the foundation for justice and governance in the ancient world. But it wasn't until the Neo-Babylonian Empire, under Nebuchadnezzar II, that Babylon reached its peak. Nebuchadnezzar not only rebuilt Babylon into one of the most impressive cities of the ancient world, but also expanded the empire's territory by conquering Jerusalem and driving the Egyptians out of the Levant. Babylon's wealth was legendary, derived from its control over key trade routes that connected Persia, India, and the Mediterranean. The city itself became a marvel, with architectural feats like the Ishtar Gate and the mythic Hanging Gardens, a testament to the empire's grandeur. Babylon was not only a political and military power, but also a cultural one. Under Nebuchadnezzar, Babylon became a center for learning and culture, attracting scholars, astronomers, and priests from across the region. The empire's religious practices, particularly the worship of the god Marduk, influenced the religious structures of neighboring peoples. Babylonian advancements in astronomy, mathematics, and medicine also left a lasting impact on the ancient world. However, Babylon's wealth and luxury also made it vulnerable. Internal power struggles weakened the ruling dynasty, and the city's defenses, once considered impregnable, were breached by the Persians in 539 BC under Cyrus the Great. Babylon fell without much resistance, in part because its people were disillusioned with their leaders and viewed Cyrus as a liberator. The empire's reliance on wealth and monumental projects couldn't compensate for its political instability, and it collapsed with barely a fight. The Persian Empire, founded by Cyrus the Great in 550 BC, is often seen as one of the most forward-thinking and administratively savvy empires of the ancient world. Instead of relying on fear to control his vast territories, Cyrus allowed his subjects to keep their customs and religions. This created a sense of loyalty and unity in an empire that stretched from Greece to India. The Royal Road, a network of roads spanning thousands of miles, enabled rapid communication and trade across the empire, strengthening its economy and governance. Persia's military was formidable, and its ability to mobilize a vast multi-ethnic army was crucial in its expansion. Under Darius the Great, the empire became a well-oiled machine, with a sophisticated bureaucracy and the introduction of coinage, which further fueled trade and economic stability. Persia was unique among ancient empires in its cultural and religious tolerance. The Persians practiced Zoroastrianism, one of the world's oldest monotheistic religions, but allowed their subjects to worship their own gods. This religious tolerance, combined with Persia's grand architectural achievements, like the palace complexes at Persepolis, and their advancement of the postal system and road networks, had a lasting influence on the ancient world. Persian art and craftsmanship, particularly in the areas of metalwork and textiles, were highly regarded across the empire. However, the empire's sheer size made it vulnerable to external pressures. Persia's conflicts with Greece, particularly during the Greco-Persian Wars, exposed its weaknesses. Though it survived these early defeats, the empire ultimately fell to Alexander the Great in 331 BC. Alexander's military genius and Persia's over-reliance on its vast resources meant that when it was finally challenged by a determined and innovative opponent, it couldn't adapt quickly enough. The Battle of Gaugamela was the final nail in the coffin for the once mighty Persian Empire. In the Classical Age, philosophy, democracy, and military might came together to create the empires that shaped the Western world. From the city-states of Greece to the vast territories of Rome, these empires set the stage for modern governance, warfare, and culture. Their achievements in philosophy, art, and law continue to influence us today, but their eventual collapse often resulted from the very same ambition and expansion that first fueled their rise. Ancient Greece is unique in that it wasn't a unified empire, but a collection of fiercely independent city-states. Despite this, Greek culture, philosophy, and military prowess left an indelible mark on history. The most powerful of these city-states, Athens and Sparta, excelled in different areas. Athens was the birthplace of democracy, philosophy, and the arts, while Sparta became a legendary military state. But the true rise of Greece as an imperial force came under Alexander the Great. After uniting the Greek city-states under his rule, Alexander embarked on a campaign of conquest that stretched from Greece to Egypt, Persia, and as far as India. He spread Hellenism, or Greek culture, across the known world, blending it with the traditions of the peoples he conquered. This cultural fusion created a lasting legacy, particularly in the areas of art, science, and philosophy. Greek culture laid the foundation for Western civilization. The philosophy of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle still shapes modern thought. Greek art, particularly the sculpture and architecture of the Parthenon, set the standard for beauty and harmony. The influence of Greek drama, with playwrights like Sophocles and Euripides, and the birth of historical writing through Herodotus and Thucydides, had a profound impact on Western literature and history. After Alexander's death in 323 BC, his vast empire fractured into several smaller kingdoms ruled by his generals, the Diadochi. These internal divisions weakened Greek influence, and over time, Greece became vulnerable to the growing power of Rome. By the time of the Roman Republic, Greece had lost its independence and was absorbed into the expanding Roman Empire. Greece's inability to remain politically unified ultimately led to its decline. Rome started as a small city-state, but became the largest and most powerful empire in the ancient world through a combination of military discipline, political organization, and a willingness to incorporate the people it conquered into its growing empire. The Roman Republic expanded through a series of wars, including the famous Punic Wars against Carthage, which gave Rome control of the Western Mediterranean. Rome's strength lay in its ability to integrate its subjects into its empire. Conquered peoples could become Roman citizens, and the empire built roads, aqueducts, and cities that connected distant regions. The Pax Romana, Roman peace, established under Augustus, brought a period of stability and prosperity that allowed trade and culture to flourish across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. Rome's influence on law, governance, and architecture still echoes in the modern world. Roman law became the foundation of legal systems across Europe, while Roman engineering, seen in their aqueducts, roads, and Colosseum, set the standard for infrastructure. Roman art, literature, and philosophy were deeply influenced by Greek traditions, but the empire also created its own distinct culture, exemplified by authors like Virgil and Seneca. Latin, the language of Rome, became the root of the Romance languages, including Spanish, French, and Italian. But Rome's success also became its weakness. As the empire expanded, it became more difficult to manage. Corruption, economic troubles, and military overreach weakened the state. Barbarian invasions from the north, combined with internal strife, led to the fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 AD. However, the Eastern Roman Empire, or Byzantine Empire, continued for nearly 1,000 more years. Rome's sheer size and complexity made it vulnerable to collapse when its leadership faltered. The Maurya Empire in India rose through the military brilliance of Chandragupta Maurya, who, after overthrowing the previous Nanda dynasty, unified most of the Indian subcontinent. Chandragupta's reign was marked by his efficient administration, with a bureaucracy that helped maintain control over a diverse empire. However, it was Ashoka the Great, Chandragupta's grandson, who transformed the empire into a force of cultural and political power. After a bloody conquest of Kalinga, Ashoka converted to Buddhism and spread its teachings throughout his empire. Ashoka's emphasis on non-violence, tolerance, and welfare made the Maurya Empire unique in its approach to governance. Ashoka's embrace of Buddhism spread the religion across Asia, influencing art, architecture, and philosophy. The Edicts of Ashoka, inscribed on stone pillars across the empire, advocated for justice, ethical governance, and religious tolerance. The Maurya period also saw the construction of monumental Buddhist stupas, including the famous Sanchi Stupa, which remains a symbol of Indian cultural heritage. After Ashoka's death, the Maurya Empire began to decline. His successors were not as capable, and internal power struggles weakened the empire. In addition, external pressures from Greek, Bactrian, and Scythian invaders further destabilized the region. By 185 BC, the Maurya Empire had collapsed, largely due to its inability to maintain the political and military strength established under Ashoka. The Han Dynasty is often regarded as a golden age of Chinese history. After the fall of the Qin Dynasty, the Han Dynasty reunified China under Liu Bang, a former peasant who became the first Han emperor. The Han perfected the use of a centralized bureaucracy and promoted Confucianism as the guiding philosophy of governance. This allowed for a more stable and orderly government, which in turn supported the expansion of the empire. Under the Han, China became the dominant power in East Asia. They expanded their territory through military conquests and established the Silk Road, which connected China with Europe, fostering trade and cultural exchange. The Han Dynasty's promotion of Confucianism deeply influenced Chinese society, emphasizing respect for authority, family, and tradition. This era saw advancements in papermaking, silk production, and astronomy. The development of the civil service system based on merit rather than birth became a hallmark of Chinese governance, influencing later dynasties and even modern bureaucratic systems. The Han Dynasty fell due to a combination of internal corruption, peasant revolts, and external pressures from nomadic tribes like the Xiongnu. By 220 AD, the empire had fragmented, leading to the Three Kingdoms period, a time of political disunity and civil war. The Han's reliance on a centralized bureaucracy became a liability when the government became corrupt and ineffective, leading to the collapse of the dynasty. As the ancient world crumbled, new empires emerged from the ashes. These medieval powers dominated the landscape of Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. Whether through military conquests, religious fervor, or strategic alliances, these empires shaped the medieval world in ways that still resonate today. But just as their rise was fueled by unity and strength, Their decline was often caused by fragmentation and internal weakness. The Byzantine Empire, or Eastern Roman Empire, rose as the western half of the Roman Empire collapsed in the 5th century AD. Centered around the impregnable city of Constantinople, the Byzantines maintained Roman traditions while incorporating Greek, Christian, and Eastern influences. The empire's strength lay in its well-organized bureaucracy, sophisticated diplomacy, and military innovations, such as the use of Greek fire in naval battles. Under emperors like Justinian I, who sought to reclaim lost Roman territories, Byzantium became a hub of culture, trade, and power in the Mediterranean. The empire's location at the crossroads of Europe and Asia made it a center for trade between the two continents. The Byzantine Empire preserved much of Roman law and culture, while also contributing to the spread of Christianity in Eastern Europe and the Middle East. Byzantine art, particularly its mosaics and icons, became deeply influential in both religious and secular contexts. The Hagia Sophia, built under Justinian, remains one of the greatest architectural achievements of the medieval world. The Byzantine Empire faced constant pressure from all sides. The Persians, Arabs, Crusaders, and Ottoman Turks all sought to conquer its territories. After centuries of warfare and internal struggles, the final blow came in 1453 when the Ottoman Turks captured Constantinople. Byzantium's decline was the result of both external invasions and internal fragmentation, which weakened its ability to defend its borders. The Holy Roman Empire was established in 800 AD when Charlemagne was crowned emperor by the Pope. The empire was not a centralized state, but a collection of semi-autonomous regions, each ruled by its own local lord. The emperor, while powerful in theory, often had to negotiate with these lords for support. Despite this, the Holy Roman Empire became the dominant force in Central Europe for centuries, playing a major role in medieval politics and religion. The Holy Roman Empire was deeply intertwined with the Catholic Church, and its emperors often played a key role in religious matters. The empire was also a center of art, architecture, and learning, particularly during the Carolingian Renaissance under Charlemagne. The empire's monasteries and cathedrals became centers of learning and culture, preserving knowledge during the so-called Dark Ages. The Holy Roman Empire's decentralized nature ultimately led to its downfall. As local rulers gained more power, the emperor's authority diminished. The empire was also weakened by the Protestant Reformation, 1517, which divided it along religious lines. The 30 Years' War, 1618 to 1648, devastated the empire, and by the time of Napoleon, the Holy Roman Empire had become little more than a collection of fragmented states. It was officially dissolved in 1806. The rise of the Islamic caliphates, particularly the Umayyad and Abbasid caliphates, was driven by a combination of military conquests and the spread of Islam. After the death of the Prophet Muhammad in 632 AD, Muslim armies rapidly expanded into North Africa, Spain, Persia, and parts of India. The caliphates established a vast empire that facilitated trade, cultural exchange, and the spread of Islamic law and culture. The Abbasid Caliphate is particularly famous for its golden age of Islam, during which cities like Baghdad became centers of learning, science, and innovation. The Islamic caliphates played a crucial role in the preservation and transmission of knowledge. During the Golden Age of Islam, scholars translated the works of the Greeks, Persians, and Indians into Arabic, preserving ancient knowledge and making advancements in fields like astronomy, medicine, mathematics, and philosophy. The Islamic world also produced beautiful art and architecture, exemplified by the Alhambra in Spain and the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem. The Islamic caliphates began to fragment after internal disputes over leadership, most notably between the Sunni and Shia branches of Islam. The Abbasid Caliphate, once a dominant power, weakened due to internal divisions and external pressures, such as the Mongol invasions. The sack of Baghdad by the Mongols in 1258 marked the end of centralized Islamic rule in the region. The rise of the Mongol Empire under Genghis Khan is one of the most dramatic stories in history. From a collection of nomadic tribes on the Central Asian steppe, the Mongols quickly became the most feared and powerful empire in the world. Genghis Khan's military tactics, lightning-fast cavalry charges, strategic use of psychological warfare, and his ability to adapt to any situation allowed him to conquer a vast territory stretching from China to Europe. The Mongol Empire facilitated the exchange of goods, ideas, and culture across the Silk Road, and their rule, while often brutal, also allowed for periods of peace and stability, known as the Pax Mongolica. The Mongols, despite their reputation for brutality, were remarkably open to different cultures and religions. They adopted the administrative practices of the Chinese, the Persians, and others, allowing their vast empire to function effectively. The Mongol Empire also promoted trade and communication across Eurasia, fostering cultural exchange on a scale never before seen. The Mongol Empire's vast size made it difficult to govern. After Genghis Khan's death, the empire fragmented into several smaller khanates, each ruled by one of his descendants. Over time, these khanates became independent of each other, and the once unified empire dissolved. The rise of new powers, such as the Ming Dynasty in China, and internal divisions led to the eventual decline of the Mongols' influence. The Ottoman Empire rose to power by conquering key territories in Southeast Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. Their use of gunpowder weapons, particularly their advanced artillery, allowed them to capture strongholds like Constantinople in 1453. Under Suleiman the Magnificent, the empire reached its peak, becoming a dominant force in Europe and the Middle East. The Ottomans' control over key trade routes and their ability to integrate different cultures and religions into their empire allowed them to maintain power for centuries. The Ottoman Empire became a melting pot of cultures, with influences from Europe, Asia, and Africa. Ottoman art and architecture, particularly the Blue Mosque in Istanbul, became symbols of the empire's grandeur. The Ottomans also played a crucial role in the development of Islamic jurisprudence, and their legal and educational systems had a lasting impact on the regions they ruled. The Ottoman Empire's decline was gradual and largely due to internal corruption, economic difficulties, and the rise of European powers. By the 19th century, the empire was labeled the sick man of Europe, and it finally collapsed after World War I, with Turkey emerging as a republic. Spain's rise to power began in the late 15th century with the Reconquista and the unification of Castile and Aragon. Thanks to explorers like Christopher Columbus and Hernán Cortés, Spain quickly built a vast colonial empire in the Americas, amassing incredible wealth through the exploitation of gold and silver mines. Spain's dominance was further cemented by its powerful navy, the Spanish Armada, which controlled trade routes across the Atlantic and Pacific. The Spanish Empire played a central role in spreading Catholicism across the Americas, Africa, and Asia. Spanish missionaries established churches, schools, and missions throughout their colonies, and Spanish art, language, and culture had a profound impact on the regions they colonized. The Siglo de Oro, Golden Age of Spanish culture, marked by writers like Miguel de Cervantes and painters like El Greco, flourished during the height of Spain's imperial power. Spain's decline can be attributed to several factors, including costly wars with other European powers, inflation caused by the influx of silver from the Americas, and poor leadership. By the 17th century, Spain had lost much of its influence, and by the 19th century, its colonies in Latin America had gained independence. Portugal was one of the first European powers to establish a global empire, thanks to its maritime explorers like Vasco da Gama and Prince Henry the Navigator. They established colonies in Brazil, Africa, and Asia, dominating trade routes for spices and precious goods. Portugal's early control over the Indian Ocean trade network allowed it to become incredibly wealthy and influential in global commerce. Portuguese influence can still be seen in the cultural and linguistic landscape of countries like Brazil, Mozambique, and Angola. The spread of Catholicism was central to Portugal's colonial policy, with missionaries playing a key role in converting indigenous peoples. Portuguese art and architecture, particularly the Manueline style, also left a lasting impact on their colonies. Like Spain, Portugal overextended itself, and its empire began to decline in the 17th century as other European powers, particularly the Dutch and British, took over its trade routes and colonies. By the 20th century, Portugal's once vast empire had dwindled to just a few small colonies. The Ming Dynasty was established after the Mongols were overthrown in 1368. The Ming expanded Chinese trade and reasserted China's dominance in East Asia. They also launched impressive maritime expeditions under Zheng He and continued the construction of the Great Wall to defend against northern invaders. The dynasty's cultural achievements, particularly in art, literature, and architecture, made it one of the most prosperous periods in Chinese history. The Ming Dynasty is renowned for its contributions to Chinese ceramics, particularly the production of blue and white porcelain, which became highly sought after in Europe and Asia. The Ming also promoted the revival of traditional Chinese culture, including Confucianism and literature. The great Chinese novel Journey to the West was written during this period, reflecting the literary brilliance of the era. The Ming Dynasty fell due to a combination of internal corruption, peasant revolts, and invasions by the Manchu people from the north. In 1644, the Manchus seized Beijing and established the Qing dynasty, marking the end of the Ming. The colonial empires marked the height of global exploration and expansion. Driven by trade, wealth, and religious zeal, European powers established colonies across the Americas, Africa, and Asia, reshaping the global landscape. They brought new ideas, technologies, and governance to the world, but their dominance came at a price, one that ultimately led to revolutions, independence movements, and the collapse of many of these once great empires. The British Empire began with the overseas possessions and trading posts established by England in the late 16th and early 17th centuries. Through its powerful navy and strategic conquests, the British Empire rose to become the largest empire in history by the 19th and early 20th centuries, reaching its peak as the foremost global power. By 1913, the British Empire ruled over 412 million people, making up 23% of the world's population, and by 1920, it covered 3.7 million square miles, or 35.5 million square kilometers, accounting for 24% of the Earth's land area. This vast empire left a significant constitutional, legal, linguistic, and cultural legacy across the globe. Known as the Empire on which the sun never sets, the British Empire spanned so many time zones that the sun was always shining on at least one of its territories. As mentioned, the British Empire began its rise in the late 16th century through a combination of naval supremacy, exploration, and the establishment of colonies in North America, the Caribbean, Africa, and India. Britain's victory over Napoleon in the early 19th century cemented its status as the world's dominant global power. The British Empire's control over trade routes, coupled with its powerful navy, allowed it to expand rapidly, making it the largest empire in history. The British Empire had a profound influence on the world's language, legal systems, and culture. English became the global language of trade, diplomacy, and culture, and British parliamentary democracy influenced political systems in former colonies. British art, literature, and science, exemplified by figures like William Shakespeare, Isaac Newton, and Charles Darwin, shaped global intellectual and cultural history. After World War II, the British Empire began to rapidly decolonize. The cost of maintaining its vast empire, combined with the rise of nationalist movements in its colonies, led to the independence of many territories. By the mid-20th century, Britain had lost most of its empire, though its cultural and political influence remained strong. The French Empire began in the early modern period, with Louis XIV expanding French territory in Europe, and Napoleon Bonaparte building a short-lived empire across Europe. In the 19th century, France established colonies in West Africa, Southeast Asia, and the Caribbean. The French Empire was driven by both economic interests and a desire to spread French culture and civilization, which they called in English the civilizing mission. The French Empire played a key role in the spread of French language, culture, and law. French art and literature, particularly during the 19th century, became a model for other countries. The French Enlightenment, with thinkers like Voltaire and Rousseau, shaped modern ideas about democracy, human rights, and secularism. French architecture and urban planning also influenced the development of cities in its colonies. France lost much of its global influence after being defeated by Britain in several wars, most notably during the Napoleonic Wars. After World War II, France, like Britain, began decolonizing, losing its colonies in Africa and Asia. The Dutch Empire emerged as a major colonial and trading power in the early 17th century, driven by the Dutch Republic's innovative merchant fleet and trading companies like the Dutch East India Company, VOC, and the Dutch West India Company. Known for its dominance in global trade, the Dutch Empire established colonies and trading posts across Asia, Africa, and the Americas. At its height, the Dutch Empire controlled key territories like Indonesia, Suriname, and parts of the Caribbean, playing a crucial role in global commerce, particularly in the spice and slave trades. The Dutch Empire's rise can be credited to the country's naval prowess and its ability to dominate global trade routes. After gaining independence from Spain in the late 16th century, the Dutch rapidly expanded their influence overseas. The establishment of the Dutch East India Company in 1602 allowed them to monopolize the spice trade in Asia, while the Dutch West India Company focused on the Atlantic, establishing colonies in the Americas and trading posts along the coast of Africa. The Netherlands' position as a global maritime power was solidified by their control of valuable trade routes and their ability to build a powerful fleet. The Dutch Empire played a significant role in spreading European culture, art, and ideas across its colonies. Dutch Golden Age painters like Rembrandt and Vermeer made an indelible mark on art history, while Dutch merchants and explorers brought back knowledge and goods from distant lands. The Dutch were also known for their tolerance of different religions and cultures, which influenced their colonies, especially in places like New Amsterdam, modern-day New York City, before it fell to the British. The Dutch influence on urban planning, architecture, and commerce can still be seen today in former colonies. The decline of the Dutch Empire began in the late 17th century when they faced growing competition from Britain and France. The Anglo-Dutch Wars weakened their naval power, and the British overtook them as the leading global maritime force. The Dutch gradually lost key colonies, with New Amsterdam falling to the British in 1664 and Ceylon, modern-day Sri Lanka, being ceded to the British in 1802. Although they retained control of Indonesia until the mid-20th century, the Dutch Empire's influence waned, and the independence movements in the 20th century marked the final chapter of their colonial rule. So, what made these empires rise and what led to their downfall? Empires rise when they find ways to effectively harness resources, expand their territory through military or economic dominance, and create stable systems of governance. However, they fall when they grow too large, become too dependent on a single source of wealth, face internal instability, or are defeated by external enemies. The ancient empires laid the foundation for organized power and culture. The classical empires spread philosophy, governance, and art. The medieval empires shaped the geopolitics of Europe Asia, and the Middle East. The early modern empires took exploration and colonization to new heights, and the colonial empires reshaped the globe, influencing the modern world we live in today. Empires rise and fall, but their legacies endure. By understanding the factors that led to the success and decline of these empires, we can better appreciate or understand how the world around us has been shaped by their triumphs and their failures,